My name is Sophia Martinez, and I'm 28 years old. Standing in this Miami courthouse hallway, I never imagined my own parents would try to steal my $12 million villa empire through fraudulent lawsuits. The betrayal hit me like a hurricane when I discovered they'd been plotting for months with a corrupt lawyer to claim ownership of everything I'd built from nothing. My hands shook as I read the legal documents accusing me of owing them my entire fortune. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my father that made my blood run cold. "You should have shared the wealth, Mija. Now we're taking what's rightfully ours." Before I dive into this unbelievable story of family betrayal and legal warfare, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're ready for a story that'll make your jaw drop, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this tale of greed, deception, and ultimate justice will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you won't believe how this courtroom drama unfolds and the shocking sentence that changed everything forever. Let me take you back to understand how I built my real estate empire and why my parents' betrayal cut so deep. Growing up in a struggling immigrant family from Cuba, I watched my parents Ricardo and Carmen work multiple jobs just to keep food on our table in our tiny Miami apartment. They always told me education was the key to escaping poverty, but they couldn't afford to help me financially. While my classmates enjoyed teenage freedom, I worked 3 jobs during high school, cleaning offices at night, serving tables on weekends, and tutoring younger students after school. Every dollar I earned went toward my college fund because I knew nobody else would pay my way. During my freshman year at the University of Miami studying business and real estate development, I continued working relentlessly to cover tuition, books, and living expenses. My parents seemed proud of my determination but remained emotionally distant whenever I discussed my career ambitions. I graduated summa cum laude at 22 with zero family financial support, immediately diving into Miami's competitive real estate market. Starting as an assistant to established developers, I spent my early 20s learning every aspect of property acquisition, renovation, and luxury market dynamics while saving every possible penny. By age 25, I had purchased my first distressed property in South Beach using savings from years of sacrifice plus a small business loan I qualified for based on my credit history and employment record. Working nights and weekends, I personally supervised the renovation, learning construction skills and building relationships with reliable contractors. When I sold that renovated villa for double my investment 6 months later, I knew I'd found my calling. Over the next 3 years, I systematically acquired and transformed 8 luxury properties across Miami Beach, Coral Gables, and Coconut Grove. My parents watched my success with what I thought was parental pride, frequently asking detailed questions about my business operations, property values, and financial structures. They wanted to know about deed transfers, partnership agreements, and how I managed such large transactions. I assumed they were simply curious about their daughter's achievements, so I openly shared information about my LLC formation, banking relationships, and investment strategies. Looking back, I realize every conversation was them gathering intelligence for their eventual betrayal. The first red flag appeared 6 months ago when my neighbor mentioned seeing my parents leaving the office of Maxwell Thompson, a lawyer whose reputation in Miami's legal community was questionable at best. When I casually asked my father about the visit during our weekly family dinner, he became defensive and claimed they were simply exploring options for updating their wills. My mother quickly changed the subject, but I noticed the nervous glances they exchanged. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't imagine the scope of their deception. 3 weeks later, I discovered through my own attorney that my parents had been meeting regularly with Maxwell Thompson, discussing my business assets and requesting copies of public property records. Isabella Rodriguez, my longtime friend from law school who had helped structure my real estate investments, warned me that such inquiries suggested potential legal action. When I confronted my parents directly about their meetings with Maxwell, their response shattered my understanding of our family relationship forever. Sitting in their modest living room where I'd grown up, my father looked me in the eyes and said, "Mija, we sacrificed everything for you, working ourselves to the bone so you could have opportunities we never had. Now you're worth millions while we're still struggling to pay basic bills. It's time for payback." My mother nodded in agreement, adding, "We deserve compensation for all those years of raising you, feeding you, and supporting your dreams. You owe us for creating the foundation of your success." Their words hit me like a physical blow because I knew the truth about my childhood. They had provided basic shelter and food, as any parent should, but they had never financially invested in my education or career beyond paying for necessities until age 18. Every scholarship application, every student loan document, every business plan had been my individual effort. I had documentation proving my complete financial independence since graduating high school, yet here they sat demanding payment for parental duties they had barely fulfilled adequately. The conversation escalated when I reminded them of the countless times I'd offered to help improve their living situation, suggesting they move to a nicer neighborhood or take vacations they'd never been able to afford. Each time, they had proudly refused my assistance, claiming they wanted to maintain their independence and didn't want charity from their daughter. Now I understood their refusal differently. They weren't protecting their dignity, they were building a case to claim I owed them compensation rather than receiving gifts. As I left their house that evening, my mother called after me with words that still echo in my nightmares, "We gave you life, Sophia. Everything you have belongs to us first." I realized then that my parents had never seen my success as something to celebrate, they viewed it as something they owned, something I had stolen from them by becoming independent. The next morning, I received legal papers that would begin the most devastating chapter of my life. The lawsuit papers arrived via certified mail on a Tuesday morning that started like any other day in my successful life. As I read the legal documents over my morning coffee in my Coral Gables villa, I couldn't process what I was seeing. My parents, Ricardo and Carmen Martinez, were claiming they had provided substantial seed money for my property acquisitions and were entitled to 75% ownership of my entire real estate portfolio. According to their complaint, they had loaned me over $2 million throughout my career and I had fraudulently failed to repay these family investments. Maxwell Thompson had crafted their legal strategy with disturbing sophistication, presenting what appeared to be legitimate loan agreements bearing my signature and dated back to my first property purchase. The documents claimed my parents had withdrawn funds from their retirement accounts and family savings to finance my real estate ventures, expecting reasonable returns on their investments. Bank statements attached to the lawsuit showed large withdrawals from my parents' accounts that coincidentally matched the timing of my property purchases, creating an illusion of financial correlation. What made the situation even more devastating was discovering that these weren't simple forgeries. Maxwell had somehow obtained samples of my authentic signature from various sources and had professional documents created that would fool casual inspection. The loan agreements included detailed terms, interest rates, and repayment schedules that demonstrated careful planning rather than spontaneous greed. This wasn't a desperate attempt to grab money, this was a calculated attack designed to destroy my life's work systematically. The conspiracy extended far beyond my immediate parents when I learned that my father's brother, Uncle Diego, had agreed to serve as a key witness supporting their claims. Diego provided a sworn affidavit stating he had personally witnessed my parents giving me large sums of cash during family gatherings and had heard numerous conversations about their financial contributions to my business ventures. His testimony included specific dates, amounts, and locations that created a false narrative of family investment spanning several years. Diego's betrayal particularly stung because he had been present during my childhood struggles and knew the truth about my financial independence. He had watched me work multiple jobs throughout high school and college, had celebrated my graduation achievements, and had complimented my work ethic during family gatherings. Now he was willing to lie under oath, claiming he had seen transactions that never occurred and conversations that never happened. I later discovered my parents had promised Diego a substantial portion of any money they recovered from the lawsuit. The media attention began within days of the lawsuit filing, with local Miami news outlets picking up the story as a fascinating case of family greed and generational conflict. Headlines like "Successful Developer Sued by Own Parents for Villa Fortune" and "Miami Family Torn Apart by Real Estate Millions" appeared across television and newspaper coverage. Reporters focused on the dramatic angle of immigrant parents claiming their successful daughter had abandoned family values in pursuit of wealth, playing into cultural narratives that resonated with South Florida's Latino community. As the story spread through social media and industry networks, I watched my professional reputation begin crumbling in real time. Potential clients started questioning whether they could trust someone involved in such a contentious family dispute, wondering if there might be truth to the allegations of financial impropriety. My first major loss came when the Aventura Development Group canceled a $15 million hotel project they had been planning to hire my firm to manage, citing concerns about negative publicity and potential legal complications. The lawsuit's impact extended beyond immediate business relationships into my personal social connections throughout Miami's tight-knit professional community. People I had known for years began treating me differently at networking events and charity functions, their conversations becoming stilted and uncomfortable. Some former friends openly questioned whether successful people like me had an obligation to support family members financially, suggesting that perhaps my parents had legitimate grievances about my lack of generosity. Maxwell Thompson proved to be a master manipulator who understood exactly how to weaponize public opinion against me. He gave interviews portraying my parents as humble immigrants who had sacrificed everything for their daughter's success, only to be forgotten once she achieved wealth and status. He painted me as a cold, calculating businesswoman who had abandoned family values in favor of material success, someone who represented everything wrong with American individualism versus traditional family loyalty. The legal strategy became clear as more details emerged. This wasn't just about money. It was about destroying my ability to continue operating successfully in Miami's real estate market. By creating enough doubt about my integrity and business practices, they hoped to force me into a settlement that would give them substantial wealth while positioning themselves as victims of my alleged greed. The lawsuit was designed to be my professional death sentence, executed by the very people who should have been celebrating my achievements. As I sat in my attorney's office reviewing the mountain of fraudulent evidence they had compiled, I realized I was fighting for more than just my financial assets. I was fighting for my reputation, my future, and my right to exist independently from family members who viewed my success as their property. The legal battle ahead would determine whether hard work and individual achievement could triumph over manipulation, fraud, and emotional blackmail disguised as family loyalty. The legal situation deteriorated rapidly when Judge Morrison granted my parents' request for a temporary restraining order that froze all my business assets pending a thorough investigation of their ownership claims. This judicial decision, based on Maxwell Thompson's persuasive presentation of forged documents and false witness testimony, immediately paralyzed my entire real estate operation. I couldn't access funds to pay contractors working on current renovation projects, couldn't complete scheduled property transactions, and couldn't maintain the cash flow necessary for my business to survive. Within 48 hours of the asset freeze, construction stopped on 3 major villa renovations in Key Biscayne, Coral Gables, and Miami Beach. Contractors who had been working with me for years were forced to abandon half-completed projects when I couldn't meet weekly payroll obligations. The incomplete properties became liabilities rather than assets, deteriorating in value as they sat exposed to Florida's harsh weather without proper maintenance and security. My reputation in the construction community, built through years of reliable payments and professional relationships, crumbled as word spread about my financial difficulties. The asset freeze created a cascading crisis that threatened to push me into personal bankruptcy within months. My business lines of credit became frozen when banks learned about the legal disputes, mortgage payments on investment properties couldn't be processed, and insurance companies began questioning coverage on properties with disputed ownership. The temporary restraining order, intended to preserve assets during litigation, was actually destroying the very empire my parents claimed to partially own. In this desperate moment, my childhood friend Isabella Rodriguez stepped forward to represent me despite the case's complexity and my inability to pay her standard fees immediately. Isabella and I had maintained our friendship since law school, and she understood both my personal character and my business practices intimately. She had helped structure several of my property acquisitions and knew the detailed financial history proving my complete independence from family support. Her decision to take my case represented the first ray of hope in an increasingly dark situation. Isabella's initial strategy focused on the discovery phase, demanding complete financial records from my parents, Uncle Diego, and Maxwell Thompson to expose the fraudulent nature of their claims. She filed motions requesting bank statements, tax returns, employment records, and communication records for all parties involved in the lawsuit. Her legal expertise in real estate law and fraud detection would prove invaluable in dismantling the carefully constructed web of lies surrounding my parents' ownership claims. As discovery proceeded, the scope of the conspiracy became increasingly apparent. Court-ordered financial analysis revealed that my parents had recruited distant relatives to provide false testimony about witnessing family contributions to my business ventures. My cousin Maria, whom I had barely seen in recent years, suddenly appeared as a witness claiming she had been present during family meetings where my parents discussed their investments in my real estate projects and their expectations for returns on those investments. Maria's sworn testimony included detailed descriptions of conversations that never occurred and financial transactions that were completely fabricated. She claimed to have personal knowledge of my parents withdrawing money from savings accounts specifically to fund my business ventures, stating she had been present when they handed me cash payments totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Her willingness to commit perjury for my parents' benefit demonstrated how Maxwell Thompson had systematically built a network of false witnesses to support their fraudulent claims. When I confronted Maria privately about her false testimony, hoping to appeal to whatever remained of our childhood relationship, she broke down emotionally and admitted the truth. My parents had threatened her job security at a family friend's business where she worked as an office manager, while simultaneously promising her $50,000 from any lawsuit settlement. She was trapped between financial desperation and family pressure, forced to choose between her economic survival and basic honesty. The conspiracy escalated further when my parents' legal team filed additional motions claiming I was mentally unstable and required family guardianship to protect both my interests and their alleged investments. Maxwell Thompson presented a psychological profile suggesting my rapid business success and current legal resistance indicated possible manic episodes or personality disorders that impaired my judgment. They requested the court appoint my parents as temporary guardians with authority to manage my financial affairs during the litigation. This guardianship motion represented the most terrifying aspect of their legal strategy because it threatened to strip away my basic adult autonomy regardless of the lawsuit's ultimate outcome. If successful, it would have allowed my parents to control my personal and business decisions while positioning themselves as concerned family members protecting a disturbed daughter. The psychological evaluation they requested was designed to pathologize my independence and success as symptoms of mental illness requiring family intervention. Fortunately, Isabella recognized the guardianship motion as legal overreach and successfully argued for my right to independent psychological evaluation by a court-approved specialist rather than my parents' chosen evaluator. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a respected forensic psychologist with extensive experience in family legal disputes, agreed to conduct comprehensive testing to address the court's concerns about my mental capacity and decision-making abilities. My second crucial ally emerged when Dr. James Mitchell, my former business professor from the University of Miami, volunteered to serve as an expert witness regarding my academic and early career performance. Dr. Mitchell had maintained detailed records of my undergraduate achievements and had written recommendation letters for my initial business loan applications. His testimony would provide independent verification of my educational accomplishments and early financial independence, countering my parents' claims about their foundational role in my success. Dr. Mitchell's records included copies of scholarship applications I had completed independently, documentation of my work-study employment throughout college, and business plans I had developed for class projects that formed the foundation of my real estate investment strategy. His willingness to testify on my behalf represented professional validation that my success was based on individual merit rather than family support, providing crucial credibility for our defense against the fraudulent ownership claims. As the discovery phase continued, Isabella and her legal team systematically gathered evidence proving my financial independence while exposing the fraudulent nature of my parents' claims. The asset freeze continued to devastate my business operations, but I now had professional allies committed to helping me survive the most sophisticated betrayal I had ever encountered. The legal battle ahead would test not only my financial resources but my psychological resilience as family members I had trusted turned against me with calculated malice. Just when I thought my family's betrayal couldn't become more devastating, I discovered that my ex-fiancé Kevin Walsh had joined forces with my parents to provide testimony against me. Kevin and I had ended our 2-year engagement 8 months earlier due to fundamental disagreements about family obligations and financial independence, but I never imagined he would weaponize our personal relationship in such a vindictive manner. His decision to testify for my parents represented the deepest cut yet in this nightmare of family warfare. Kevin's sworn deposition claimed that during our relationship, I had frequently confessed to feeling guilty about my parents' financial struggles and had expressed intentions to repay them for their supposed investments in my career. According to his testimony, I had admitted during intimate conversations that my business success was built on family money that I had never properly acknowledged or repaid. He described private moments between us where I allegedly expressed anxiety about owing my parents substantial sums and discussed plans to compensate them once my business became more established. The cruel irony was that Kevin's testimony contained grains of truth twisted into malicious lies. I had indeed discussed my parents' financial situation during our relationship, but only to explain why I regularly sent them money for groceries, utility bills, and medical expenses despite their pride-driven refusal to accept regular support. I had expressed frustration about their stubborn independence and had wished I could do more to improve their living conditions. Kevin had transformed my compassionate concerns into evidence of financial debt, using my love for my parents against me in the most manipulative way possible. What made Kevin's betrayal even more shocking was discovering he had been secretly meeting with my younger brother Antonio to coordinate their testimony and ensure their stories aligned perfectly. Antonio, who was 26 and had always been the family's golden child despite his chronic unemployment and gambling problems, had agreed to testify that I had regularly discussed owing our parents money and had promised to make substantial financial contributions to the family once my business became profitable. Antonio's involvement cut deeper than any other betrayal because we had maintained a close sibling relationship despite our different life paths. I had quietly helped him through several financial crises related to his gambling addiction, paying off credit card debts and loan sharks without our parents' knowledge to protect both his safety and their emotional well-being. I had supported his attempts at rehabilitation and had never judged his struggles with addiction, believing that family meant unconditional support during difficult times. During Antonio's deposition, he testified that I had always talked about owing our parents everything and had promised to make them wealthy once my real estate investments reached a certain value. He claimed I had specifically mentioned feeling obligated to repay them for sacrifices they made during my childhood and had discussed percentages of my business that rightfully belonged to them. His testimony painted me as someone who had always acknowledged family debt but had become too greedy to honor those obligations. The coordination between Kevin and Antonio became apparent when their testimonies included identical phrases and remarkably similar details about conversations they claimed to have had with me. Isabella's cross-examination revealed they had obviously rehearsed their stories together, but the damage to my case was already done. Having two people who knew me intimately providing consistent testimony about my alleged acknowledgement of family debt created powerful evidence supporting my parents' fraudulent claims. As the conspiracy expanded, my parents launched a systematic campaign to destroy my reputation within Miami's Latino community, spreading rumors about my alleged abandonment of family values and traditional obligations. They attended church services I no longer regularly attended, speaking tearfully to congregation members about their ungrateful daughter who had forgotten her roots once she achieved success. They portrayed themselves as humble immigrants betrayed by an Americanized daughter who had rejected Latino family loyalty in favor of individualistic greed. The community pressure became overwhelming as family friends, neighbors from my childhood, and members of cultural organizations I had supported financially began questioning my character based on my parents' narrative. People who had once celebrated my achievements now whispered about my alleged selfishness and lack of respect for the family sacrifices that enabled my success. The Latino business network that had provided crucial support during my early career started distancing themselves from someone who appeared to have violated fundamental cultural values about family obligation. My grandmother Rosa, who had been my closest family ally throughout my childhood and early career, became another casualty of my parents' manipulation campaign. Rosa had lived through the family's immigration struggles and had always been proud of my educational achievements and business success. She had frequently defended my independence against family criticism and had supported my decision to build my own life rather than remaining dependent on family approval and support. However, my parents applied intense pressure on Rosa, threatening to cut off all family contact if she continued supporting my position in the legal dispute. They convinced other family members to isolate her socially unless she chose the family's side over mine, creating an impossible situation for an elderly woman who depended on family connections for her emotional and social well-being. In a tearful conversation that broke both our hearts, Rosa explained she had to support my parents to avoid complete family exile in her final years. The isolation became complete when even family members who privately agreed with my position felt unable to support me publicly due to fear of family retribution. I realized my parents had successfully weaponized family loyalty and cultural expectations to turn everyone against me, creating a unified front that made me appear to be the villain in a story where I was actually the victim of systematic fraud and emotional manipulation. Standing in my empty villa one evening, surrounded by legal documents and financial records that proved my innocence, I felt the full weight of my family's betrayal crushing down on my spirit. The people who should have been proudest of my achievements had instead chosen to destroy everything I had built, using the most intimate knowledge of my character and relationships as weapons against me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I seriously considered giving up everything and leaving Miami to start over somewhere my family couldn't reach me. The morning after my darkest night of considering surrender, I woke up with a renewed determination to fight back against my family's systematic destruction of my life and reputation. Sitting in my home office surrounded by financial records that proved my innocence, I realized that giving up would validate their narrative and allow them to benefit from fraud and betrayal. I called Isabella Rodriguez and told her I was ready to launch a comprehensive counterattack that would expose every lie they had told and hold them accountable for their criminal behavior. Isabella had been waiting for this moment, having already developed a methodical strategy to dismantle the conspiracy piece by piece through professional investigation and forensic financial analysis. Her first recommendation was hiring Lucas Bennett, a highly regarded private investigator with extensive experience in family fraud cases and corporate financial disputes. Lucas had previously helped expose several high-profile cases of inheritance fraud and business embezzlement, earning a reputation for his meticulous attention to detail and ability to uncover hidden financial connections. Lucas immediately began investigating Maxwell Thompson's background and discovered a disturbing pattern of similar cases involving family disputes and questionable financial claims. Thompson had been quietly disciplined by the Florida Bar Association twice in the previous 5 years for ethical violations related to client relationships and evidence handling, though he had managed to avoid full disbarment through technical appeals and political connections. More importantly, Lucas found evidence that Thompson had previously been disbarred in New Jersey for orchestrating fraudulent inheritance disputes before relocating to Florida and rebuilding his legal practice. The investigation into Thompson's methods revealed he specialized in identifying successful individuals with complicated family relationships, then approaching desperate family members with schemes to claim ownership of their relatives' assets through fabricated investment claims. He had perfected a system of creating convincing forged documents, coaching witnesses on consistent testimony, and manipulating family emotions to build seemingly legitimate cases that were actually elaborate fraud operations designed to force settlements rather than win trials. While Lucas focused on exposing Thompson's criminal enterprise, Isabella arranged for comprehensive bank analysis by Dr. Rebecca Chen, a forensic accounting expert who specialized in tracking financial transactions and identifying fraudulent claims in complex business disputes. Dr. Chen's analysis of my parents' banking records revealed the devastating truth about their supposed investments in my real estate ventures. Not only had they never provided money for my business, but their account activity showed they had never possessed the funds they claimed to have invested. Dr. Chen's forensic analysis revealed that the large withdrawals from my parents' accounts that supposedly corresponded to my property purchases had actually been transferred to offshore gambling accounts linked to my father's betting activities and my brother Antonio's casino debts. Rather than investing in my business, my parents had been systematically depleting their retirement savings through gambling losses while Antonio accumulated tens of thousands of dollars in debt to loan sharks and illegal betting operations. The financial investigation exposed the real motivation behind the lawsuit. My parents and brother were facing financial catastrophe due to gambling addiction and needed a massive infusion of money to avoid losing their home and potentially facing physical danger from creditors. They had chosen to target me not out of greed alone, but out of desperate financial necessity that made them willing to destroy their own daughter's life to solve problems created by their irresponsible behavior. Armed with this evidence, I made the difficult decision to confront Antonio privately one last time, hoping to appeal to whatever remained of our sibling bond and convince him to abandon the conspiracy before criminal charges were filed. Meeting him at a quiet cafe near his apartment, I presented copies of Dr. Chen's financial analysis showing his gambling debts and explained how his testimony was helping our parents commit fraud that could result in federal criminal charges for everyone involved. Antonio's reaction revealed both his desperation and his continued loyalty to our parents despite the legal risks he was facing. He admitted his gambling addiction had spiraled out of control and acknowledged that our parents had promised him enough money from the lawsuit settlement to pay off his debts and start fresh. However, he refused to withdraw his testimony, claiming that family loyalty required him to support our parents regardless of the legal or ethical implications of their actions. During our conversation, Antonio revealed that our parents had been threatened by some of his creditors and were genuinely fearful about their physical safety if his debts weren't resolved soon. This information helped me understand their desperation while confirming that their lawsuit was motivated by crisis rather than calculated greed. However, understanding their motivation didn't excuse their willingness to destroy my life through fraud and perjury to solve problems they had created through their own poor decisions. Recognizing that I needed to rebuild my public reputation while the legal battle continued, Isabella recommended hiring Morgan Foster, a public relations expert who specialized in crisis management for high-profile individuals facing character assassination campaigns. Morgan immediately began developing a media strategy to counter my parents' narrative by highlighting my documented history of financial independence, educational achievements, and charitable contributions to the Miami community. Morgan's research revealed that my parents' public relations campaign had been more sophisticated than I realized, involving carefully coordinated social media posts, community speaking engagements, and media interviews designed to build public sympathy for their position while portraying me as a cold, ungrateful daughter who had abandoned family values. Thompson had clearly advised them on message coordination and media strategy, understanding that public opinion would influence both potential jurors and settlement negotiations. The public relations counterattack began with documented evidence of my actual relationship with my family, including bank records showing thousands of dollars in gifts I had sent them over the years, photographs from family celebrations I had funded, and testimony from family friends who had witnessed my generosity and respect for my parents. Morgan coordinated with Isabella to ensure our public statements supported rather than complicated our legal strategy while rebuilding my reputation in the professional and social communities where I needed to continue operating. As our investigation deepened and our counterattack gained momentum, I felt my confidence returning for the first time since this nightmare began. The evidence was overwhelmingly on my side, and I now had a professional team committed to exposing the truth and holding my family accountable for their fraud. While the emotional pain of family betrayal would take much longer to heal, I was finally ready to fight back with the same intensity and determination that had built my real estate empire from nothing. The breakthrough in our investigation came when Lucas Bennett discovered that Maxwell Thompson had been using a false identity and fabricated credentials throughout his Florida legal career. Through extensive background research and contacts in law enforcement, Lucas revealed that Thompson's actual name was Martin Thornfield, and he had been permanently disbarred in 3 different states for orchestrating elaborate fraud schemes involving family disputes, inheritance claims, and business partnership fabrications. Thornfield had developed an extremely sophisticated system for creating new legal identities when his fraudulent activities were exposed in previous jurisdictions, using forged law school transcripts, manufactured work histories, and false character references to gain admission to state bar associations under assumed names. His Florida practice was built entirely on fraudulent credentials, meaning every case he had handled and every legal document he had filed was potentially invalid due to his lack of legitimate legal authority. Isabella immediately filed emergency motions with the court to investigate Thompson's credentials and halt all proceedings until his legal standing could be verified. The motion included Lucas's evidence of Thompson's true identity and criminal history, along with documentation proving he had been using forged documents to practice law illegally in Florida for over 4 years. This revelation not only undermined my parents' case but exposed them to additional criminal liability for conspiracy with someone they knew or should have known was operating fraudulently. While the court investigated Thompson's credentials, Dr. Rebecca Chen completed her comprehensive financial forensics analysis that systematically destroyed every element of my parents' ownership claims. Her report proved beyond any doubt that my parents had never possessed the funds they claimed to have invested in my business ventures, had never made the large financial transfers supposedly documented in their bank records, and had actually been depleting their assets through gambling activities rather than making family investments. Dr. Chen's analysis revealed that the bank statements presented as evidence of my parents' investments were sophisticated forgeries created by altering legitimate bank documents through digital manipulation software. The supposed withdrawal records showing large cash payments to me were actually fabricated by combining real account headers with false transaction data, creating documents that appeared authentic to casual examination but revealed obvious manipulation under professional forensic analysis. The financial investigation also uncovered crucial evidence that completely vindicated my claim of independent success. Detailed employment records from my 3 jobs during high school, scholarship documentation from the University of Miami proving I had received full academic financial aid, and bank records showing every dollar I had earned and saved during my early career. Dr. Chen's timeline analysis proved definitively that my first property purchase had been funded entirely by my personal savings and a legitimate business loan based on my credit history and employment income. Perhaps most damaging to my parents' case was Dr. Chen's discovery of email communications between my father, Uncle Diego, and Thompson discussing their fabrication strategy and coordination of false testimony. These emails, recovered from Thompson's computer during the court-ordered investigation of his credentials, included detailed discussions about coaching witnesses, creating convincing false documents, and manipulating family relationships to support their fraudulent claims. One particularly devastating email from my father to Thompson read, "Diego is nervous about lying under oath, but he understands we need his testimony to make this work. Antonio is completely on board since we promised to pay his gambling debts. The key is making sure everyone tells the same story about family meetings and cash payments that never actually happened." The email evidence proved that my parents, Uncle Diego, and Antonio had conspired knowingly to commit perjury and fraud, understanding fully that their testimony was false but proceeding anyway due to financial desperation and Thompson's assurances that they were unlikely to face criminal prosecution. These communications provided the smoking gun evidence that Isabella needed to prove criminal conspiracy and demand immediate dismissal of all claims against me. As news of Thompson's fraudulent identity and the email evidence spread through Miami's legal community, several other families came forward to report similar experiences with Thompson's fraudulent schemes targeting successful individuals through family manipulation. The state attorney's office launched a comprehensive investigation into Thompson's activities and began building criminal cases against everyone involved in the various fraud operations he had orchestrated throughout his Florida career. The investigation also revealed that my high school academic records, still maintained in the Miami-Dade school system's archives, provided irrefutable evidence of my educational achievements and work-study employment during my teenage years. These records proved I had been financially independent since age 16, earning my own money through legitimate employment while maintaining excellent academic performance that earned me scholarship opportunities for college. Isabella arranged for Dr. James Mitchell, my former business professor, to provide expert testimony about my undergraduate performance and early career development based on his detailed academic records and recommendation letters he had written for my business loan applications. Dr. Mitchell's documentation showed that my business plans and financial projections had been entirely my own work, developed through classroom learning and personal research rather than family consultation or guidance. The evidence also included video footage from my college graduation ceremony showing my parents' attendance but no evidence of the substantial financial support they claimed to have provided throughout my education. University financial aid records proved I had received academic scholarships, work-study employment, and student loans, but no private family contributions that would have been required to be reported under federal financial aid regulations. With Thompson's fraudulent identity exposed, the forged documents invalidated, the email conspiracy revealed, and my financial independence thoroughly documented, Isabella prepared to present our evidence to the court and demand not only complete dismissal of my parents' claims but criminal prosecution for everyone involved in the fraud. The truth had finally emerged from beneath layers of family manipulation and legal deception, providing the foundation for both my vindication and my family's accountability for their betrayal. The courtroom was packed with media representatives, legal observers, and members of Miami's professional community when the final hearings began to determine the fate of my parents' fraudulent lawsuit. Judge Morrison had been thoroughly briefed on Thompson's false identity and the evidence of criminal conspiracy, creating an atmosphere of intense scrutiny as my parents' legal team attempted to salvage their collapsing case. The discovery of Thompson's fraudulent credentials had forced my parents to hire a legitimate attorney, David Richardson, who was struggling to defend claims he knew were based on fabricated evidence. Isabella opened our defense with a systematic presentation of evidence that methodically destroyed every element of my parents' ownership claims while exposing the criminal conspiracy that had created this nightmare. She began with Dr. Chen's financial analysis, projecting enlarged bank statements and transaction records on courtroom screens that clearly showed the digital manipulation used to create false evidence of parental investments in my business ventures. The forensic financial evidence was devastating in its clarity and comprehensiveness. Dr. Chen testified about the technical analysis that had revealed digital alterations to bank statements, the timeline impossibilities in my parents' claimed investment pattern, and the actual gambling-related destinations of the funds my parents had supposedly invested in my business. Her expert testimony provided irrefutable proof that my parents had never possessed the money they claimed to have given me and had actually been losing their savings through gambling activities during the time period when they allegedly were making family investments. Isabella then presented the email evidence recovered from Thompson's computer, reading selected communications aloud in court that documented the conspiracy between my parents, Uncle Diego, and Thompson to fabricate testimony and coordinate their false narrative. The courtroom atmosphere became tense as the judge and observers heard my father's own words discussing coaching witnesses and creating stories about family meetings and cash payments that never actually occurred. The most dramatic moment came when Isabella called my former business professor Dr. Mitchell to testify about my academic performance and early career development. Dr. Mitchell brought original documentation from his files proving my independent educational achievements, my scholarship awards, and my completely self-funded business planning during college. His testimony provided powerful evidence that my success was built on individual merit and hard work rather than family financial support. My parents' new attorney, David Richardson, attempted to salvage their case by focusing on emotional appeals about family loyalty and cultural obligations rather than addressing the overwhelming evidence of fraud. He argued that regardless of the technical legal issues surrounding documentation, my parents deserved compensation for the sacrifices they had made during my childhood and the emotional support they had provided throughout my educational and career development. Richardson's strategy involved calling character witnesses to testify about my parents' reputation in the community and their demonstrated love for their children throughout their lives. Several family friends and church members testified about my parents' pride in my achievements and their visible happiness when discussing my success with neighbors and community members. However, these emotional testimonials couldn't overcome the factual evidence proving their legal claims were fraudulent. When Uncle Diego took the stand to defend his previous testimony, Isabella's cross-examination revealed the extent of his involvement in the conspiracy and his willingness to commit perjury for financial gain. Under intense questioning, Diego became increasingly confused about the details of his supposed witnessing of family investment meetings, contradicting his previous sworn testimony multiple times and eventually admitting he had never actually seen my parents give me money for business purposes. The courtroom drama escalated when my cousin Maria, who had previously provided false testimony supporting my parents' claims, appeared unexpectedly with her own attorney to recant her earlier statements. Maria testified tearfully about the pressure my parents had applied to force her participation in the fraud, including threats to her employment and promises of financial rewards from any lawsuit settlement. Her recantation provided crucial evidence about the systematic nature of the conspiracy and the manipulation tactics my parents had used to recruit false witnesses. Antonio's testimony represented the emotional climax of the trial as he struggled between family loyalty and legal honesty while facing potential criminal prosecution for perjury. Isabella's cross-examination revealed his gambling debts and his parents' promises to pay those debts with money from the lawsuit settlement. Under intense questioning, Antonio admitted that his previous testimony about family investment meetings and my acknowledgement of debt had been coordinated with our parents and Thompson to support their fraudulent claims. The most devastating blow to my parents' case came when Isabella presented evidence of my actual financial history with my family, including bank records showing thousands of dollars in gifts I had sent them over the years for groceries, utilities, medical expenses, and other necessities. These records proved that far from owing my parents money, I had been consistently supporting them financially despite their pride-driven refusal to accept regular assistance. Isabella also presented testimony from contractors, business associates, and financial institutions that had worked with me throughout my career, all confirming my reputation for financial responsibility and independent business operations. These witnesses provided powerful character evidence supporting my credibility while undermining my parents' portrayal of me as someone who had forgotten family obligations and failed to acknowledge family contributions to my success. As the evidence presentation concluded, the courtroom atmosphere reflected the overwhelming nature of our case against my parents' fraudulent claims. Judge Morrison's questions during testimony indicated his growing understanding of the criminal conspiracy that had created this legal nightmare, while media representatives frantically took notes on what was clearly emerging as a case of family fraud rather than legitimate business dispute. The final day of testimony would determine not only the outcome of the lawsuit but whether my parents would face criminal prosecution for their fraud and conspiracy. With the truth finally emerging through comprehensive evidence and expert testimony, I felt confident that justice would prevail despite the emotional devastation of family betrayal that had brought us to this courtroom confrontation. The final court session arrived on a humid Thursday morning in late October, with Judge Morrison prepared to rule on the asset freeze and the underlying ownership claims after weeks of devastating evidence against my parents' fraudulent lawsuit. The courtroom was packed with media representatives, legal observers, and family members who had chosen sides in this bitter dispute that had torn apart our family and exposed criminal conspiracy involving forged documents, perjured testimony, and systematic fraud. Isabella had presented our case methodically and comprehensively, proving beyond any doubt that my parents' claims were entirely fabricated and that they had conspired with a criminally fraudulent attorney to steal my life's work through legal manipulation. The evidence was overwhelming: financial forensics, email communications, expert testimony, and recanted witness statements that exposed every element of their conspiracy while proving my complete financial independence throughout my career. David Richardson, my parents' legitimate replacement attorney, had struggled to mount any defense against the mountain of evidence proving fraud, instead focusing on emotional appeals about family relationships and cultural obligations that had no legal relevance to property ownership disputes. His final argument centered on asking the court to consider the human elements of family conflict rather than the technical legal issues surrounding documentation and testimony. Judge Morrison's questions during final arguments indicated he was prepared to dismiss my parents' claims with prejudice while referring the matter to the state attorney's office for criminal prosecution of everyone involved in the conspiracy. However, he offered my father Ricardo one final opportunity to address the court before rendering his decision, perhaps hoping for some acknowledgement of wrongdoing or expression of remorse that might influence sentencing recommendations for the criminal charges that were certain to follow. Ricardo approached the witness stand with the same stubborn pride that had characterized his behavior throughout this nightmare, showing no sign of remorse or acknowledgement that his fraudulent lawsuit had been thoroughly exposed and defeated. He seemed to believe he could still convince the judge that family relationships and cultural values should override the legal evidence proving his criminal behavior, planning to make an emotional appeal about parental rights and family loyalty. Isabella rose for what would be the final cross-examination of the trial, having carefully planned her questioning strategy to expose any remaining deceptions while giving my father enough rope to hang himself through his own words. Her approach was methodical and professional, asking specific questions about dates, amounts, and circumstances surrounding his claimed financial contributions to my business ventures. Under Isabella's questioning, Ricardo became increasingly agitated as she systematically challenged every element of his fabricated investment narrative. When she asked for specific details about the alleged cash payments he claimed to have given me, his answers became confused and contradictory, revealing his inability to maintain consistency in his false testimony. His frustration mounted as Isabella's questions exposed the logical impossibilities in his timeline of supposed family financial support. Isabella's questioning intensified as she focused on specific dates when Ricardo claimed to have withdrawn money from his retirement accounts to fund my property purchases. She presented bank records showing that during several of these dates, his accounts had insufficient funds to make the withdrawals he claimed, while other supposed investment dates coincided with large gambling losses that depleted his available savings. The courtroom tension reached its peak when Isabella asked the crucial question that would destroy my parents' case forever, "Mr. Martinez, isn't it true that you never supported Sophia financially because you considered her a burden, not an investment?" This question struck directly at the heart of Ricardo's fabricated narrative while challenging his basic honesty about our family relationship. Ricardo's response revealed the explosive anger and resentment he had been suppressing throughout this entire ordeal. Rather than maintaining his fabricated story about loving investment in my success, he lost control completely and screamed at Isabella with a fury that shocked everyone in the courtroom. His voice echoed off the courtroom walls as he shouted the words that would end this nightmare forever. "That ungrateful girl owes us everything," Ricardo screamed, his face red with rage and his hands shaking with emotion. "We should have gotten rid of her when she was born." The silence that followed his outburst was deafening as everyone in the courtroom processed the devastating admission he had just made under oath. Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard as he called for order, but the damage was complete and irreversible. Ricardo had just admitted publicly that he had never supported me financially and had actually resented my existence from birth. His statement contradicted every element of his lawsuit while revealing the true motivation behind his fraudulent claims: not love or investment, but anger and resentment toward a daughter he had never truly wanted. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs as reporters frantically scribbled notes about Ricardo's explosive confession. Isabella sat down calmly, knowing that her strategic questioning had accomplished exactly what she intended. Exposing the truth about my parents' real feelings toward me while destroying their fabricated narrative about family investment and support. Judge Morrison immediately ruled from the bench, lifting the asset freeze and dismissing my parents' lawsuit with prejudice based on Ricardo's admission and the overwhelming evidence of fraud. He ordered the case file transferred to the state attorney's office for criminal prosecution and awarded attorney's fees and damages to be paid from my parents' remaining assets. Maxwell Thompson, whose fraudulent identity had already been exposed, was immediately taken into custody on multiple criminal charges including fraud, conspiracy, and practicing law without a license. The bailiffs also arrested Ricardo and Carmen on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and filing false legal documents with intent to defraud. As my parents were led away in handcuffs, Ricardo's final words echoed through the courtroom: "We gave you life, and this is how you repay us." His complete inability to understand that he had just confessed to fraud and lifetime resentment toward his own daughter demonstrated the psychological dysfunction that had created this nightmare. The one sentence that changed everything had revealed the truth about my parents' real feelings toward me while destroying their fraudulent lawsuit completely. Their own words had proven that this was never about family investment or cultural obligations. It was about resentment, greed, and a willingness to destroy their own daughter to solve financial problems created by their irresponsible behavior. The aftermath of my legal victory unfolded rapidly as Miami's business and legal communities rallied to support my reputation and career following the complete exposure of my family's fraudulent conspiracy. Within 2 weeks of Judge Morrison's ruling, 3 major development projects that had been canceled during the asset freeze were reinstated with improved terms, as potential clients recognized my integrity had been thoroughly vindicated through comprehensive legal proceedings. The media coverage shifted dramatically from sensational family conflict stories to celebrating my resilience and the triumph of justice over fraud and manipulation. Local television stations featured my case as an example of how hard work and documentation could overcome even the most sophisticated attempts at legal theft, while business publications highlighted my story as inspiration for entrepreneurs facing family pressure and manipulation. Criminal prosecutions moved forward swiftly against all conspirators involved in the fraud. Maxwell Thompson, whose real identity as Martin Thornfield was confirmed through federal investigation, received a 15-year federal sentence for his extensive fraud operation that had victimized dozens of families across multiple states. My parents Ricardo and Carmen were sentenced to 3 years in state prison for conspiracy, fraud, and perjury, with restitution orders requiring them to pay my legal fees and damages from their remaining assets. Uncle Diego received 2 years probation and community service after cooperating with prosecutors and providing additional evidence about Thompson's methods of recruiting family members for fraudulent testimony. My cousin Maria avoided prosecution entirely due to her voluntary recantation and assistance in exposing the conspiracy, though her employment situation remained precarious due to the stress and publicity surrounding her involvement. My brother Antonio faced the most complex legal situation due to his gambling addiction and the underlying debts that had motivated his participation in the conspiracy. Through Isabella's advocacy and my personal intervention, he received a suspended sentence contingent on completing gambling addiction treatment and making restitution payments over 5 years. His path to redemption would require genuine commitment to rehabilitation and rebuilding trust through consistent honest behavior. The financial recovery of my business exceeded my most optimistic expectations as clients, contractors, and financial institutions recognized that my legal vindication proved my integrity and professional competence. The asset freeze had actually created a backlog of demand for my services, as several major projects had been delayed pending resolution of the legal dispute. Within 6 months, my company was busier and more profitable than ever before. Using my renewed success as an opportunity to give back to the community that had ultimately supported me, I established the Martinez Family Independence Scholarship Fund to assist young people from immigrant families who were pursuing higher education and career development without family financial support. The scholarship program specifically targeted students who demonstrated academic excellence and work ethic while maintaining family relationships despite choosing independent paths. The scholarship fund became personally meaningful as I met recipients who faced family pressure to abandon educational opportunities in favor of immediate employment to support family members. These young people reminded me of my own journey and the importance of supporting individual achievement even when it conflicted with traditional family expectations about children's obligations to parents and extended family. My relationship with Lucas Bennett, the private investigator who had played a crucial role in exposing my family's fraud, developed into a romantic partnership built on mutual respect and shared values about integrity and justice. Lucas's professional experience with family fraud cases helped him understand the emotional complexity of my situation, while his investigative skills provided ongoing security as I rebuilt my reputation and business relationships. The legal victory created an unexpected opportunity for reconciliation when Antonio completed his rehabilitation program and approached me with genuine remorse for his role in the conspiracy. Our relationship required careful rebuilding based on his demonstrated commitment to honesty and recovery, but his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and work toward redemption provided hope that family relationships could survive even serious betrayal when followed by authentic change. My grandmother Rose's private apology for her inability to support me during the crisis led to a deeper understanding of the impossible position my parents had created for elderly family members who depended on family connections for social and emotional support. Her explanation of the pressure she had faced helped me forgive her choice while maintaining appropriate boundaries about future family dynamics. Through extensive therapy with Dr. Sophia Martinez, a family therapist specializing in trauma and betrayal, I processed the emotional impact of discovering that my parents had never truly supported my independence and had actually resented my success from the beginning. The therapeutic work helped me understand that their behavior reflected their psychological limitations rather than any failure on my part to be a good daughter. The most profound life lesson emerged from recognizing that true family consists of people who celebrate your success rather than seeking to exploit it, who support your independence rather than trying to control it, and who demonstrate love through respect rather than manipulation. The friends, mentors, and professionals who stood by me during this crisis proved more valuable than biological relationships based on guilt, obligation, and conditional love. My experience taught me that success often reveals the true character of people around you, attracting both genuine supporters who celebrate your achievements and exploitative individuals who view your success as something they deserve to share. Learning to distinguish between these two types of relationships became crucial for protecting both my emotional well-being and my continued professional growth. Standing in the renovated villa where this nightmare began 18 months ago, I reflect on the journey from betrayal to vindication to healing. The property that my parents tried to steal through fraud has become a symbol of my resilience and independence, proof that individual achievement can survive even the most sophisticated attempts at destruction by those who should have been most supportive. The financial security I've rebuilt provides peace of mind, but the emotional security that comes from knowing I can survive the worst possible family betrayal provides something even more valuable: the confidence to continue taking risks, building relationships, and pursuing ambitious goals without fear that success will make me vulnerable to exploitation by those closest to me. What question would you ask someone in your family if you suspected they were plotting against your success? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself from manipulation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if you think I made the right choices throughout this ordeal. If this story resonated with you or made you think about your own family dynamics, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming betrayal and building genuine success. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might be facing similar family pressure or manipulation. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your independence and achievements are yours to protect, even from family members who claim they deserve a share. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never let anyone convince you that your success belongs to them.